All right. Hi, folks, and welcome to Film Optimists, where we talk about all things film with a healthy dose of optimism. I am your co host, Seth Boyd.
And I am Megan Tierney.
And today we did something a little different. We watched a movie that neither of us had seen before, a movie that came to my attention and something I thought Megan and I would both be interested in as film buffs and enjoying older films as well. This is the 1953 movie, The Hitchhiker, directed by Ida Lupino. And I'm highlighting the year because, folks, there's several movies called Hitchhiker or The Hitchhiker or something similar. Exactly. Yeah. Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
That's right.
We have a few things. And there's at least, I think there was like a 70s one with Rutger Hauer. And then there was a remake of that with Sean Bean. That's a little bit more of a direct horror movie. Bottom line is, we're not talking about those movies. We're talking about the 1953 film noir, The Hitchhiker. And before we get into the movie, Megan, what did you think?
I quite enjoyed it. So as a film student, I think I keep calling myself that. That feels a little like ostentatious, to be honest, folks, because like, I got like
We took film classes.
Yeah, film class is very much the way to go. And so like from the little knowledge I had of film noirs, I kind of had the vibe of what it was going in. This movie sort of turned things on its head in terms of like its settings that I'd like to like talk with Seth about too. And I think, like you mentioned it, but then this is ticking a couple boxes for us because we haven't had yet a female director, which is really exciting. And also this is a bit genre bending in itself in that women directors were pretty obviously just not well known in general in Hollywood, unfortunately. Sure. And that's still the case, but also for specifically the genre of film noir, it's pretty unheard of, is from the small research that I've done. I don't know much about Ida, unfortunately, but
Sure.
Very competent film. Like I enjoyed it, and it ticked all the boxes in terms of like being a just well-sealed package that I enjoyed. So I'm excited to talk about it.
Fantastic, and glad you enjoyed. I enjoyed it as well. We might do more experiments like this of just going in blind together. But yeah, so let's talk a little bit about. First, I want to confirm you're correct, Megan. From my research, she is considered to be the only woman to have directed a film noir, at least from like what we call the classic or unofficially official film noir period. In Hollywood. There's probably, and this was a low budget movie. She produced the credit. It's this RKO distributed it, but it was the filmmakers, which was her company that she founded with her husband at the time.
Oh, yes.
Made this. So she was an entrepreneur and a very adventurous filmmaker who was an actress primarily, and famously an actress. She was in 58 movies. She was in movies like High Sierra with Humphrey Bogart. She was in Seawolf. There's Sherlock Holmes. She was in a lot of big movies and had a long career, but realized kind of somewhere in the middle there that she preferred to direct, and largely kind of like John Cassavetes kept starring in films so he could have the money to make his own movies. So she directed, I believe, 8 or 9, and this is probably the most famous. And the other movies she directed would be maybe more expected from a female director. Like she did a lot of movies about social issues, which we're going to address. There's some in this movie as well, but she did a movie about sexual assault and things like this that were not being talked about as much. But this isn't exactly like a cash, checking a cash here to do this movie either. This wasn't like a jumping on a bandwagon. She was really excited to do this movie.
Passion project.
Exactly.
That's nice.
And I think one of the other things that called my attention to this is this movie is 71 minutes long.
Right.
And it is very simple. It is two guys are going on a fishing trip to Mexico from El Centro, California, and are from Arizona. I can't remember which, but they're on the border. They're going fishing. They pitch up a hitchhiker. The hitchhiker turns out to be a murderer, and there's really no subtlety to it either. He pulls a gun on them within a minute. 6 minutes and 30 seconds into this movie, this has occurred. So this is a tightly paced movie, and you're really with them the majority of the movie. And I think it plays out pretty realistically. But yeah, I was just excited to see something that was that simple. That was that bare bones, that stripped down, and how confident it'd be made. And I thought the cinematography was great in this movie. I thought a lot of the shots looked great.
I agree. Even the for me also the soundtrack does a lot, and it kind of just
Hmm.
brings you back. I guess it's such a specific feeling that these old timey films have, but I love it, and I thought it just pulls a lot of weight for me and was not offbeat at all. It felt
Right.
really really good actually.
I'm really glad to hear you say that. I remember I took a Gothic fiction class at St.
Mhm.
Mary's, which is a very fun class, and everybody had to do a presentation on a movie, and you have to show a clip, and people were doing like Wuthering Heights or some of the other usual suspects, like the 40s versions of them, and people would just be laughing like the music was goofy. And if you're not used for it, I can understand because we're so used to parodies of it. Like
Yeah.
we're used to parodies of big 50s, 40s dramatic Hollywood
Yes.
music and
Yeah.
dramatic settings, but it still works if you can lean into it, if you can experience the
Oh yeah.
movie. And as you watch more of them, you get more into it. Yeah, there's a lot of, I mean, a man screaming at the helicopter that misses them, and then there's dramatic music,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it's great. But there's a different style that I think is acquired, but I love it. And
Mhm. And it's very just timely, I think, and
right, right.
there's something a kind very old Hollywood about it all, and there it has a glamour, I guess, to it is a word to use that just is.
Sure.
It feels very evocative of like history and
Mm.
history of film in general that I really like. I agree with what you're saying. So.
I have to look up who the composer was because yeah, I
Right.
remember really liking the music. Leaf Stevens.
Hmm.
You while I look him up, then Megan, you were mentioning the locations. I think that's
Yeah.
certainly worth talking about if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, so majority of their journey takes place in Mexico, and then also I wanted to mention that, like I was happy to I checked a little bit like they had a lot of like seemingly Mexican actors and or just
Mm.
like Spanish actors in general, and also surprisingly for me in this day and age, they had many scenes, maybe like 30-second scenes fully in Spanish
Yeah,
and no subtitles. I don't really know the history of like subtitling movies, but and I'm sure like this just wasn't normal in that era, but you know, we would
right.
it was like pretty full scenes of full Spanish, like lots and lots of quite a bit of dialogue in there with like moving plot along a little bit. And so I was kind of surprised by that and was happy to be in the seat of I unfortunately don't know Spanish, and my family is just so disappointed in me being half Mexican, but you know, I could follow along as much as I could, but you were
Right.
in the seat of the, the white audience, or I guess of just like not knowing, and I kind of like that, or just not being familiar with it. And I was surprised to see how much of it was in there, which was nice, I thought.
I agree, and yeah, like, and I think it's intentional that there's. I mean, there's like the joke that'll show up about like Netflix has the caption of speaks in foreign language, like, yeah,
Yes.
motherfucker, what were they saying?
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
but I think this was not a streaming service choice. I think this was I think this is the director's choice because you typically get, I believe it's the actor or the character of Collins. He speaks Spanish and is usually explaining what's actually
Yeah.
happening to the other two.
That's right.
We're doing a great job here. Just going to get the characters' names real quick because there's really only three people.
Go
There's
for it.
Roy Collins and Gilbert Bowen are the
Roy
fellas on a
Gilbert.
trip, and then Emmett Myers is the villain. He's the
Hmm.
hitchhiker who's already killed several people.
Right.
But yeah, so there's Collins is usually able to translate, so you'll
Hmm.
get a brief like summary of it. But yeah, you have like whole conversations in Spanish without
Right.
subtitles, and I thought that was really cool as well.
Hmm.
Um, I honestly kind of assumed because she made this movie that Ida Lupino was of
Hmm.
that descent. She's English.
Oh,
She's an
I saw that.
English. Yeah. I guess originally the Lupino family was Italian, but like I thought what we're on this note. How did you? You're right. I think we have some Mexican actors in here, and I thought they were dealt with more respectfully than a lot of movies,
Yeah. Yeah.
particularly of this era and
Sure.
still today.
Hmm.
Um, and you also have one of my a tactic that I think always works if we're making it very clear that this guy is a villain partially because he's racist. And so like
Yeah.
the Emmett Myers character keeps referring to the Spanish language as Mexican
Mexican. Yeah.
and he doesn't want to hear it
Yeah.
and
It's
is
very easy to hate this
yeah,
this
which
guy.
I like. This guy's a scary guy.
Hmm.
He's not a smart guy.
No, no.
His plan's not great. It's moving along. He's dumb. He doesn't understand why the radio doesn't work at times. He doesn't understand why the car is having trouble, or he doesn't
Yeah.
understand why they can't just magically speak English. So
Yes. I see what you're saying, Seth, but I personally didn't find him like scary almost. I almost thought he was like just like incompetent, like you said, which you're touching on. But I think
sure.
also the characters touch on it, Roy and Gilbert, because by the end of it, this guy is just like so annoying
Yeah.
and like delusional and demanding, I guess.
Yeah.
But I think by the end of it, they were just like, you all you have is the gun.
Right.
Their plot line is them saying like, because he's dragging them along on this like horrible journey of just demands and whatnot. But by the end of it, I think I agreed with the characters when they were like, all you have is a gun. Like they were kind of done with him and giving it back to him a little bit more. And I was like, oh,
that's
my
true.
God, the guy. I just found him like very annoying and very, very unlikable. So that made
I think that's a very fair point. He is buffoonish. I think scary in that like this guy actually has killed people before.
That's true.
And seems to be making it very clear he intends to kill them. But you're also right. And I think this is a fun kind of remind me of Rope, just reference our own episodes of like this is all largely in one location, which is the car.
Yeah.
And you have like I think it's definitely going through your mind when you're watching this movie. It's like, well, is he really going to shoot the driver? Because what's he going to do then? It's like maybe because he's stupid. But you kind of go through like it is understandable to me that these guys don't try to escape until they do, which doesn't go well for them. But they obviously have a gun on them most of the times, and he sleeps with literally one eye open. He has a condition, so they can't actually tell if he's asleep or not.
That was scary.
Right. So that's scary.
It's like creepy, I guess.
But yeah, it felt like a little bit of this is another thing I wanted to touch on is like going back to genre bending. This almost many times feels like a horror movie more directly than a suspense movie, because like it begins with a title card talking about this is based off a real thing, which it's loosely based off the Billy Cook killer, but it says this I'm trying to remember what it says, but something like this could happen to you. Is the title card that begins with not a horror movie, but Fargo has a lot of mixing up this is a real story thing when it's not. It's very loosely.
Well, that's a huge horror movie trope now.
Well, Texas Chainsaw Massacre. That's what I think of. Like that says based off a true story, which absolutely wasn't. But yeah, you're right. It's huge horror trope.
I mean, yeah.
Yeah. So it's kind of leaning to that, and then he is a psycho killer that they're stuck with. So there's some moments that you have that going on, and you have a little bit of the just make a run for it, kind of yelling at the camera.
That's true.
But the TV.
I wondered, like, I didn't know too much about noir again, like as a genre, but I from what I remember, I think that's kind of a theme that goes through it is having the antagonist, I guess, be sort of more of a psychological figure, and or like we hype him up beforehand instead of like him just egregiously killing people or like very, very bloodbathy. I think from what I remember, that's kind of not
I think that's
noir.
That's correct. Like noir is typically, even the heroes are a little bit more complicated version on anti-heroes. They're not quite Joker or something, but they're I think even like a lot of the great detective stories are film noirs, like The Big Sleep. I mean, most Bogart movies, that kind of narrows it down, are film noirs, which often do have a villain who doesn't end up ultimately getting away with it. A great quote is, I don't remember who it's attributed to. It's a Greek tragedy. It's a fall from a height. It's all from like your ivory tower. A film noir is a fall from the sidewalk. These are not people who are doing great already, and things go worse for them. So like, and actually, I thought this was actually too. Our two main characters are just like the most middle of the road, basic guys, and they're not. Their first conversation kind of got me prepared. Like, I don't know if I like these guys. They're talking about like, oh, should we go to this nightclub with like this exotic dancer,
that's right,
or not? And the guy who doesn't want to go just very casually or callously says, oh, she's probably dead. That was a long time ago. It's like, wow, I wasn't expecting this to be the opening lines of our heroes.
That was weird also, because like, so was the assuming like dancer hooker woman very old, or
right.
they were like middle-aged, I mean, at least
or is
like
it just like
40-year-old? So I was like,
with the way her life was going or something,
oh,
you
that
know.
that makes sense.
Yeah, but it was a very strange, like, should we go look at this old, the girl we used to know in town? No, she's dead.
Yeah. Totally.
And we don't find out a whole lot more about them. They were both in the war.
Hmm.
um I think they do a good job. So these are fairly famous actors. These are not Bogart or Cary Grant. The main cast, Edmund O'Brien's the most famous one, who did win an Oscar for another picture, and he did quite a few things. And Frank Lovejoy and Juan Tallman. And I think a lot of these people actually worked in other Ida Lupino films that she directed or produced. But no one, to my eye, is a typical Hollywood leading man handsome, or
Yeah.
or even, not to be cruel to them, charismatic. They're not someone who's just going to carry the movie on their charm, and that's
Sure.
not this type of movie. I like going back to what's different about it too of noirs is a lot of this movie is shot beautifully in the open
Yes.
on the road.
Mhm.
And I think the only other movie I know like that is like Memento, which is not that it's on the road, but that's a daylight noir primarily. That's
Wow.
just shot middle of the day Pasadena, which from my understanding wasn't a style, or wasn't a stylistic choice as much. It was just a practical, a lot easier to shoot in the daytime with the budget they had.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a pretty unique thing, and it still, I think, carries the weight of it.
I mean, it
During
felt
those
like a
shots.
Western almost.
Yeah, it does. I mean, especially it's a border town,
Yeah.
you have more, the majority of the characters are Mexican. Yeah.
Mhm. That's what I was seeing too. I mean, it was kind of cool. It felt a little I had never quite seen a older film. This is like 53, I believe.
Yeah, 53.
Yeah, 53, that it felt very much I could feel its like indiness, I guess.
Yeah.
At the time. So I do assume that that's kind of like what it was. So that was really fun. I mean, I had not seen that, and that's not to say that it was poorly done. Also, I think like editing, I really like give it up to editors, like for both writing and films, because you can do so much and like really paint a pretty picture with
Right.
the way you edit. And so that for me was the case definitely in this, and like also just like good use of everything. I just like that indie and lower budget requires you to really stretch and pull as much as you can and use as much as you can. So I think that's what was happening here. I kind of agree with you, Seth. Like the actors didn't do too crazy much for me. Like it wasn't
Sure.
like this amazing film or like actor on display kind of thing.
Right.
But the whole thing in general does work, and like that's a testament to, I think, just filmmaking craft as itself, and like indie works.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I couldn't find a budget for this, but apparently like her production company, the filmmakers, almost never went over $200,000, which even in
Wow.
the 50s, that's very cheap.
Well, do you particularly know, Seth? I was trying to like think of the genre a lot, and
Sure.
just anything I knew about it, but also I know that from what I remember, I think that like the private college class that we took, the main genre is rainy night in a city, kind of.
Yes, yeah,
like,
rainy night in a city, Venetian blinds, often,
go.
light and shadow. So yeah, let's talk a little bit about, oddly, like a movie like Citizen Kane
Mhm.
is story-wise not really a film noir, but it's shot a lot like a film noir,
Yes.
and
Mhm.
and it has some of the same themes. It's just not like, not, it doesn't quite fit in, but it's very similar, and it's like visually as a really good reference. And I just mentioned it because it's a more widely seen movie.
Yeah.
But film noir aesthetically was a lot of the stuff the German expressionists were doing. It was a lot of really stark contrast with shadows,
Okay.
with light, and it was typically black and white. And yeah, it's dark and gloomy. It's silhouettes, and that.
Okay.
Well, maybe one of those film noir shots in this movie is when they are the cut of Emmett Myers when he's chasing them down the car. Just that really moody lighting around him that looks really great. It was really well lit.
Yes. Yeah.
So like, yeah, that, but you're definitely right, it's typically at night. It literally means black film or dark film.
Right.
A French critic came up with it, but it always kind of has a pretty bleak worldview of the world being darker than someone would like to accept.
Mhm.
And that's certainly the case with these ones. It's just thinking we could just go be neighborly, be friendly, and offer a hand to somebody, and then here we are.
That makes sense to me. I always had that in my head. So, and it also kind of reminds me too that like so much of film genre could also be very aesthetic driven, which I think
Mhm.
that noir is from what I know. So that, and
Right.
also like about just like literally the image of it
Hmm.
instead of necessarily the story. I think like this
I
film,
think that's absolutely correct.
yeah,
Yeah.
film noir may be an instance where it's actually both because it is tinged by that like darkness in the story plotline as well.
Right.
So that's interesting. I like
Because
that it's like kind of so specific.
yeah, because like your hero in the film noir could be a quote unquote good guy. I just watched the A Touch of Evil, Orson Welles movie that is also actually very similar. It's on the Mexican border, and you have corrupt cops. You have the main character is actually a good person, but there's a lot of corruption in this movie.
Sure.
There's drug addicts, there's cops planting evidence and stuff like this. There's a lot said about humanity and all that. So like you can have a lot of different types of story. You don't even like there doesn't need to be a they're usually the detective, but sometimes just a drifter. Sometimes it's just a guy. This is one of those movies, just like guys showing up in the wrong place, the wrong time. So it's very loose roles in terms of who the protagonist is, except for someone who's not doing great and is usually doing worse by the end of the movie.
That makes sense. How so in talking about that, you mentioned it before, Seth. Our antagonist is a bit of a racist. A bit is
Right.
is not quite the word actually.
Yeah.
How did he work for you? Like throughout it?
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I also wonder in the 50s. I kind of thought this was part of the Ida Lupino spoke often about being conscious with making social statements,
Yeah.
and 50s America. I mean, America today is not as hospitable as we would like. A lot of racism, particularly against Mexicans and people of Latino descent, happening right now. So I really think she was trying to make a statement by like, this guy is the one who's wrong. The guy who's murdering people is the other one who thinks this in the movie.
Mhm.
The other two guys are clearly bothered by this,
Yeah.
but not exactly in a position to say anything. He's threatening the little girl at one point for just daring to speak Spanish, and Collins is praying over her in Spanish. So
Yeah.
I thought I think this works well. I think the movie did not feel racist for having a racist.
Yeah.
I think that's how we talk about it, but
I,
is
I
to
got that
have
too.
right have someone who's clearly the wrong one,
Yeah.
illustrating the bad behavior. And Touch of Evil does that as well. Orson Welles' character is very racist, and
Mhm.
yeah,
Yeah, I mean, I I don't know Ida, and I didn't know any much more of her film,
yeah,
but I could only assume that that was very intentional. Like I got that too as well, and
yeah,
I wonder if you mentioned that she did other things like political activist movies, so that kind of makes sense to me too. If there were multiple moments, it wasn't just necessarily the the like crazy racist like antagonist, but
right.
I feel like the whole thing was kind of tinged with a bit more humanity, I guess, that she had to rely on to propel the characters a little bit forward. So I did enjoy that. I thought it was,
Yeah,
and it was kind of a departure from typical noirs that I have like seen or heard of here and there.
yeah, absolutely. I mean, even like the characters are very working class, right? Like
Right.
one's a draftsman and one's a owns a garage. Like they're doing honestly like that'd be doing pretty good for one of our classmates to be
Yeah.
doing either of those things. But these are not they're not flying to Mexico. They're driving
Yeah.
pretty a long ways. They're not staying at a resort to go fishing.
Mhm.
They don't own the boat. They're
Yeah.
so this was guys who fought in the war and are making the most of things. And I do love that the last shot is them having their arms around each other, walking away, saying it's over
Yeah.
now.
Yeah.
I thought that was a sweet friendship
Right.
moment. And of course, you have multiple depictions of, as we mentioned, like the Mexican people, even like the police and
Yeah.
the police chief, but also just like villagers who were just presented very uh I don't know, without much commentary, who just with dignity.
Right.
I felt like, yeah,
Right. I mean, I thought back to because of the scenery as well. We again to bring it back to another episode, but I
sure,
talked about Stagecoach
right,
and how that racism was really hard to take almost and like kind of like
right,
over. but I think this one was very, it just had a different like tinge to it that Stagecoach certainly did not. I was just pretty shocked. But again, and I think that I agree with you, Seth. Like, there's something you can kind of tell. I feel like now when it's getting a little hairy or not in terms of the content or something like that. And I did not feel that this movie was doing that, which was kind of refreshing.
Yeah, I didn't doubt the intent,
Right there, you
and
go.
it wasn't a joke,
Yes,
that's about it. So
mhm.
yeah,
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. I thought I'm sorry I missed this, but this actually apparently had we might have been seeing like a revitalized print of it, Megan, because it was re-released for a while and it was playing at the Castro Theater in San Francisco
Really
like 10 years ago. That would have been cool to
interesting.
see. But yeah, it's got some more recent recognition, and people are calling, especially female filmmakers are calling it,
Yeah.
influential in their work. So it's very cool to see this very unique piece of Hollywood history.
Yeah, yeah. I know. For me, female voice in like film does not have to be like it's a sentimental film. It's like it's very
Right.
touchy-feely, and this is, I mean, obviously this is a film noir, so like
Right.
it's not that. And then we have all these dark characters, so I really like it for that aspect as well. I like what it stands for, I guess, and it is
Mm,
cool that it is like the first of its kind, I guess. So thank you, Ida.
yes.
We appreciate that.
I was gonna ask you in general, are you a fan of true crime narratives?
You know, I think actually a little more in TV, to be
Mm,
honest. I'm not like not an SVU girl or anything like that,
right.
um, but I don't know. They're able to spin a yarn a little bit. I think since the compression of TV makes it kind of like it has to be pretty exciting. I
That's
think
true. Yeah,
that's what kind of gets me, but not much, to be honest, in film,
sure.
at least.
Yeah, I think there's a line that's kind of difficult of when is this disrespectful,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
especially if it is a live action thing. Like I watched the documentary The Staircase,
Okay.
and there's the live action version of it, which everyone who's involved with the documentary is very upset about because it's taken a
Oh,
lot of liberties. And it's like, well, this is, the family's alive. This
yeah.
is a fairly recent thing. This feels like a weird version to do your own fantasy of here's what maybe happened thing. But like this movie obviously does, the Hitchhiker does take liberties.
Yeah.
They had already caught him, and I think, and this was also going back to the Hays Code we mentioned. They had to reduce the number of actual murders down
Really?
to 3, yeah, because the Billy Cook killed more people than that, I think. And so there was some of it was, I think, out of respect. There was like, we're not telling that exact story, we're telling a similar story.
I see.
Um, and I think like that works a little better for me. Or Psycho is not exactly Ed Gein, but it's similar and
Yeah.
things like that. Well, very cool. I think we should move on to our recommendations, if that's all right with you, Megan.
Yeah, sure.
Cool. So I think we're going to go with another movie by a female film director, right?
Sure, yeah. In the
Cool.
spirit of this new thing that we're talking about, which we're excited to talk about.
Cool. Do you want to start us off?
Yeah, so the film actually brought something to mind, and I was a little side note here is that it's actually kind of sad. I had to look up like pretty popular movies that are directed by
Mm,
women, and it's
right.
far and few. And also, like, I knew this before, but like very few women have won Best Director for the Oscars, which I know now Oscars are like whatever, but
Right.
it still says something. Of
It's
course,
only 2, right?
it is two, I believe.
Catherine Bigelow and I'm blanking her name, who
I know.
directed
I just
Nomad,
got
right?
them Bigelow.
Yeah.
I'm blanking too. And so there you go. Like it's just like
Right.
it's hard to pinpoint. So and they are definitely out there. It's just like it's about exposure, and I think that there's still like such a problem of getting like women directed films exposed, to be honest. So that's my little spiel. But anyways,
Absolutely. And
happily, places like the Sundance Film Festival, which I was very luckily able to attend my senior year at St. Mary's College, shout out. We were able to go, and then many of their films are women directed, like I think like over majority, which is really
that's really cool.
obviously. I'm maybe just the year that I went, there were a lot, and I like sought out as many as I could, obviously. But there was one kind of straggler. I think it was towards the end, and it wasn't like mind-blowingly amazing, but it actually had some film noir elements. It had some just very fun filmic elements that caught my attention, and that is a movie called To the Stars. It's directed by a woman who I don't know her name. Her name's Martha Stevens. I have to look her up now. And it's also available to watch on Hulu for anybody who can see it right now. But beautiful cinematography, set in very rural Ohio, I believe, or like, oh, sorry, Oklahoma. Kind of same era. So it's about around the 50s or so. And it has a simple plot line that becomes a little bit more nuanced as we go along. I feel like Hitchhiker had a little bit of that as well. I think that Seth and I were talking a little bit about it and said that there's psychological elements in it a little more than what may be expected, but overall the plot line is quite similar, and it's basically just a girl who moves to Oklahoma and befriends someone, but ends up also having a love connection there. And there's some supernatural elements added to the very, very rural poor town of Oklahoma, which is really, really fun to see. So all of that really worked for me. And again, that indiness came out for me a lot, but not in the best way possible. The movie looks amazing and like uses all of its elements so well. I was absolutely transported to like the 50s, which was awesome to see costume wise, everything like that. So really, really fun one. And like it's more than just the plot and here you go, wrapped up in a bow kind of thing, that which I think both of these movies did quite well.
Fantastic pick. And I had to look it up. It's Chloe Zhao, I believe is how you pronounce the name of the woman who directed No Man Land, who did the Eternals after that.
Yeah.
So but to my knowledge, it's still only 2 women have won an Oscar, and while Oscars are bullshit, that still speaks volumes. So yeah, I have to check out To the Stars out, Megan. That sounds really cool.
Yeah, I think you'll like it, Seth.
I bet I will. The one I'm going to go with is called You Were Never Really Here. This is directed by Lynn Ramsey, starring Joaquin Phoenix.
Yeah.
And this has a lot of the same things of like you wouldn't expect. On the surface, it doesn't seem like a story a woman wouldn't necessarily want to tell. And this is, prejudiced voice saying that. It doesn't seem like the nurturing thing that one might associate. But it's a story that I think is told fairly often poorly, because it is about a man who is a former soldier who is getting a woman out of organized prostitution. And I think there's been a couple Rambo movies that are like that. There's Taken. There's a lot of very machismo action, I'm going to save the world thing that always have, again, a very racist bent towards whoever the people are. And this one doesn't have that. Like this is happening in Washington, D.C. and New York primarily. This is American politicians who are the villains here, who are running this corrupt child prostitution ring. And it's a really great depiction of PTSD with Joaquin Phoenix as well. You have a really great editing technique that kind of, you just get these brief flashes to maybe something that happened as a kid, maybe something that happened in the war. You're just talking like 2 quick frames and he's kind of waking up again, and not enough to fully get what's happening, but enough to get that it's on his mind. And it is a very violent movie. There's also like the longest, most violent sequence keeps cutting away right before the action happens. Like Joaquin Phoenix will be raising a hammer, it cuts away, then you see the result of this next. And this is a technique that is oddly tasteful, but still very effective, and it's still very gut-wrenching, so really brutal, violent movie that has a lot of similar vibes with this. And it's also, I think it's 80 minutes long. It's crazy how tightly paced it is, and a lot happens in this movie. So I highly recommended that by Lynn Ramsey.
Oh, nice. Oh, yeah. Walking, so
oh, he's great. I think you would like it, Megan. It also has a thing where he was talking to Lynn Ramsey. It's like, this guy's often on stakeouts, all right, so he has a beer belly. Like, this isn't like, I'm not looking like Ryan Gosling for this movie. Like, I am often like, my character is wearing the same basic like all black
Yeah.
like construction pants and stuff,
Mhm.
and is probably just like chewing on gummy bears for hours waiting for the thing to happen. So
So
I
funny.
like that attention of detail from the actor,
Yeah.
but it's also like this. I think Joaquin Phoenix is a handsome man, but this is not a body goals movie.
Yeah.
This
Sure.
isn't. I don't think you're gonna have as many people having a poster of this as a taxi driver
Uh,
drive. So,
right, right.
um,
And we love that.
yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
But cool. So this might be a little shorter one, but we're talking about shorter movies. So
I know we'll do it again. I mean, this is certainly not the only movie directed by a woman that
right, right. I think
we're planning to talk about.
we certainly have more to talk about. I think we need to get into Agnes Varda and a
Yeah.
lot of other people. But
Yeah, quickly, I want
sure.
to say like Greta Gerwig's amazing and
Yeah.
Little Women and my personal favorite Lady Bird, which I think I've talked about a little bit before. Um,
Yeah. I
I
still need to
love
see
them
it.
so much, and I think they are an expression of her. But I do like that we've kind of picked movies that you mentioned, Seth, that they're not a typical feminine, I'm using air quotes, movie
Right.
where people think that like it has to be about a bunch of like four sister girls or like or again a little Catholic like schoolgirl from
Right.
Sacramento, which everybody should be listening to these stories, but that's not also what like women directed film has to look like or is.
Right.
It's just like I like that we kind of picked that. picked,
I agree. And I think I think especially with like Hitchhiker, you really get the sense that Ida Lupino is like film noir is fun and it's fun to make. I want to make
yeah,
this fun movie. Like this like fun on the edge of your seat,
you got it.
violent thing. And it's really cool to see somebody who's definitely capable of doing a lot of other things, also doing a man's world thing so well. Man's
Oh
world
yeah.
being like Hollywood at the time.
Mhm.
And is there a female? There's just a little girl, I think is the only female character in this
That's
movie,
right.
right?
Yeah,
There's really just men talking and she nailed it.
exactly.
So yeah, I thought that was interesting.
Yeah,
Like you said, that Megan, this certainly won't be our last entry for female filmmakers.
right.
um, they've been doing it since the 1860s, I think, is Alice Guy Blanche. So
That's right.
maybe 1880s,
Mhm.
but we got history here. So
We do. Mhm. Who's your guys' favorite? We must have
yeah,
like some in the air, or there's some that would have gone through the woodwork. So let us know below in the comments and or in our email, filmoptimists plural at gmail.com. We love to like interact with you guys there. So just let us know.
yes.